upload right quick. All right, this is Trump and the G. I'm the Stock Exchange, of course, here with Mr. Mitchell, and this is Trump and the G endorses Maria Chappelle-Nadal for Congress. Trump and the G's own Maria Chappelle-Nadal. Well, I think we can say she's part of the team after having been at the town hall meeting a few times. But this is, it seemed like a pretty natural evolution for her career. Last time we spoke to her, I think she was leaving politics after being, in public service for years, which is what it's supposed to be. You do public service, you go back amongst the people. Now she wants to come back into politics, which seems to be a natural evolution, going from state senator to Congress. And I first discovered Ms. Chappelle-Nadal on national TV during the Ferguson riots. She was speaking to Democracy Now! She also spoke to Don Lemon at the civil unrest out there after the Michael Brown shooting. And all I know is that I was on Twitter one day and people were tweeting about this kid being shot by the police in broad daylight. And by the time the media had caught on to it, it was an inferno out there in Ferguson. It seemed like there was a lot of unrest, mostly black youth facing off with the police, who were in riot gear, military grade equipment, tanks. It looked like a war zone out there, and it just seemed like every night a building was being burned down, and you was kind of afraid that something would happen between the police and the rioters. I think mostly it was like tear gas being thrown or whatever. And Miss Chappelle-Nadal was in the thick of it. She was speaking to. She came on. It was almost like a lighthouse in stormy seas, where she's saying, "Look, these people are triggered. Nobody. How often do you see someone get gunned down by the police in broad daylight?" And the media was trying to portray it as a crowd that was out of control, and she was trying to portray that people who were upset and they were protesting peacefully as possible. And there were people coming from outside of Ferguson who was actually doing a lot of things as well, who weren't from Ferguson. And she was saying, she was trying to keep the peace and saying, "Look, these are not violent people. These are not bad people. They're upset, and they're venting for years of so-called police misconduct and almost police terrorism." And she's also tried to push for people going from activism to actual progress and actual policy, and to go to your local politician's office, local congressman or what have you, state senators, to go to actually try to address a lot of the public's concern and still trying to do it yourself. And so she stood tall for black folks in Ferguson. She stood tall for black people across the country, I think. So she came to Trump and the G. Thought she'd be a good addition to the town hall meeting to discuss the economy and what happened since Ferguson. Because Ferguson, it was a tipping point, I think, and also triggered a lot of things where triggered the Black Lives Matter movement, also triggered a lot of progressive movements across the country. So I'm going to show a clip of what she had to say about Ferguson and her take on the economy. Try to share my screen.
I guess the first thing I want to start with is with Maria, and also with Professor Brockman too, just discuss what they think their take on the economy, broad level.
The way that I look at it, every single day, people are having to make choices, and hard choices. They're trying to determine if they're going to stay in their homes to find cheaper rent. And that's what I hear when I go door to door all the time. And when we're in our neighborhoods, and I know you asked about global, but I deal with people every day at the very local level. And I could talk about the global too. But people want security, economic security. And when you don't provide that, that presents a problem. Now, on the national level, I was the first one in the Missouri legislature to talk about Trump's policy on tariffs. Not even our U.S. senators were talking about that at the time. And I brought it up because in Missouri, The three main industries that we have are mechanical parts, agriculture, as well as medical parts as well. And we also have Boeing. Boeing's in the district that I represent, and you know what they do. But we have a lot of huge corporations that would be impacted because of some of the policies that we're hearing about in Washington, D.C. So I believe that there is insecurity, financial insecurity, and I think it's going to make an impact globally. We've been looking at leaders in Canada and other places in the world who are really concerned and who are taking advantage of some of the bad decisions, economic decisions that are being made right now.
Yeah, I mentioned Boeing, 25%.
Okay, so I mean, I was blown away. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I have a background in economics. We had Professor Brofman here, who was a professor of economics, and I was like sitting there flabbergasted. Like, she had a command for the material. She had a command for the issues of that faced state of Missouri and St. Louis, and she could speak at a high level in terms of like economics, and also speak at a granular level as far as dealing with the people and issues facing the people. She seemed like she could speak to Congress, she could speak to fundraisers, she could speak to big business, and she can also relate to her local constituents. And she gave data and information, and she gave clear answers about the issues facing her community and how in the path forward. You don't usually get that from politicians. At least back then, with a lot of redundant politics, mostly you get from politicians are like silly messaging, and they talk in circles where you really can't understand what they're saying a lot of times, so you can't hold them accountable. But to wrap it up, I think she showed a passion for her community. She showed a command for the issues, and she seemed like a fighter. So that was my take on Miss Chappelle-Nadal. Wanted to get your take on her after having met with her.
Yeah, no, I thought and I think that was either her second or third by the time I met Maria the first time. And once the taping was over and we had really a chance to just kind of chat, behind the scenes, you really see that she's exactly the same person on camera as she is off camera. That the thing that I found refreshing, right? You kind of hit the nail on the head with a few areas, is one, the clarity. She doesn't mince words, but she also does it in a way where the listener doesn't feel alienated, right? Doesn't feel like someone is talking over you or at you. And I'm sure, I don't live in, unfortunately, I don't live in Maria's district, because I feel like I would be a proud constituent of Maria's, but I feel as though I can see what her constituents connect to and why she has such close ties to her community, and she really does exude that passion. And like you said, it's really that really well balanced, which is rare. That balance between really empathy, right, and the type of empathy that, in my opinion, you only find with folks that come from or really represent the communities that they come from. So it's not an empathy from an outsider's view, right? Like, we all have the capacity to see things from communities that we don't belong in, situations that we've never been in, and feel a sense of compassion, feel a sense of understanding from what we're viewing, right? But it's another thing to have a level of understanding, have a level of compassion, because you connect to the community in which either that particular event or a series of things is happening to, because you are amongst those people. There is no difference between you and the community that is being affected, and that's the piece that I think folks connect with just on a kind of a personal level, and to do it with the ability to even cut through preconceived notions, stereotypes, and in terms of like I'm sure that she deals with constituents that, when you're getting your news from unverified sources, Facebook, Twitter, family members, folks at work, and you have an impression of something that's one just completely inaccurate, and she has the ability to cut through that, and do it in a way that, like I stated before, that really doesn't make the listener going to feel attacked or just stupid, right? Just plainly like, okay, you're talking over me, and because you're trying to win a debate, and that's not her approach. She truly is seeking to educate, right? And that was just the sense that I got. That was my interaction with her. And from that point on, just wholly supported her continued run. She's had 16 years under her belt, as really a community servant. Almost don't even want to use the word politician. She is a politician, but I do feel that she's more of a community servant. Yeah, I think that probably aptly describes Maria. So certainly, compared to the current incumbent that she's running up against, and then the new entrants, which all are black, from Wesley Bell, Corey Bush. Wesley Bell, I think is from a local standpoint, more of a local household name as a county prosecutor, and certainly has been in headlines lately, not for things that you want to be in headlines for, which I'm sure we'll get into, but I think I certainly would like to think that Maria's name has that same local weight, if not better, right? Because she is a local community servant. She's truly, when she says she talks to people every day, she's not a getting ready to say Diane Diane Feinstein, but not Diane, but who am I thinking of out of California?
Not Barbara Feinstein.
No, Diane Feinstein just passed long ago.
Okay. Not Nancy
Yeah,
Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi, right? Where she talks about, she talks to the people. It's like, you mean your corporate donors? Those the folks that you're talking about. You're not doing knocking, Nancy. Come on, you're not doing knocking in San Fran. Whereas Maria definitely is door knocking. She says she's door knocking, essentially canvassing her district. That's exactly what's happening. In other words, so that was just my impression of Maria, and she's been the same since. Has never deviated in personality at all in my experience. So definitely looking forward to seeing this campaign and what she has next.
Okay.
In the community.
Okay. So, and Miss Chappelle-Nadal, she showed me up on my own platform. I don't particularly like that. But anyway, so we'll talk about the other two candidates right quick. She's running against Wesley Bell. I'll give an overview of Wesley Bell. You mentioned he's the prosecuting attorney for St. Louis. He's been held that office since 2018. He took over for Bob McCullough, who was the controversial figure during the civil unrest out there in Ferguson, after Michael Brown got shot. And what we know is that there were no police cameras back then, and we had this police officer who shoots this kid, and he's driving around for weeks, he's driving around for days before he ever even I think he drove around for a couple hours before he went to the police precinct to actually tell what happened, because the community already saw what happened. Then we're waiting from the media to tell us what happened for him to get a report. It's weeks gone by and there's no report from this guy. It's almost like he was watching TV as we were watching, trying to figure out what the newscaster was saying. He probably would say and then repeat the script. And so Bob McCullough, there was no transparency whatsoever, and Bob McCullough seemed to be part and parcel of this machine that's been going on in Ferguson for decades, where there's no accountability for the police, there's no transparency, and you thinking that the police work for the community, right? They were acting like the community is beholden to the police, like they weren't public servants, and they give you information on a best efforts basis, if at all. And Bob McCullough seemed like he was part of this lack of transparency. And then there was a trial. I still don't know what happened with the trial, and so it was just bad news out there. And so people like, this guy needs to be replaced. Wesley Bell ran against him and won 2018. It seemed to be a watershed moment to get Bob McCullough about the paint. How well thought of Wesley Bell is, I'm not sure, but I guess you want to look at crime statistics. Maybe I'm sure he'll run on that in terms of how crime has declined or his ability to prosecute offenders. In 2023, he announced that he was running for Senate. Then he, I guess in July 2023, then he pivoted and said he would run for Congress in October. So in July, he was talking about running against Josh Hawley, which, good luck with that. I mean, he unseated Claire McCaskill, and he was President at the time, President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence threw all kinds of resources behind Josh Hawley. They wanted Claire McCaskill gone, and he was state AG. He was only there he ran and said, I will not run for high office. As soon as he got to state AG, Trump and Mike Pence shortly convinced him to run for high office, to run for the Senate seat against Claire McCaskill. And Trump and Mike Pence and the Republican Party threw all kinds of resources behind Josh Hawley. He beat Claire McCaskill, surprisingly. And then he got in trouble for kind of being a little too excitable about whether the election was stolen or not. So I think he got censured. But anyway, so I don't think he was going to beat Josh Hawley. But now he thinks he can probably take that congressional seat against Cory Bush. And the other thing is that he's got. I mean, Mr. Chappelle-Nadal's already thrown haymakers at this guy, and checking his record, also said that he bungled a shooting out in St. Louis, where the guy didn't get prosecuted. He got out, and then he eventually shot and killed a teenager, like a 19-year-old nursing student, who happened to be Mr. Chappelle-Nadal's niece. So I'm sure she has some personal issues with him as well that may come up during the campaign. So I'll let you weigh in on Mr. Bell. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of looking at Wesley. One of to your point, that was a watershed moment. The thing that I found interesting is this lawsuit that, in fact, I believe his attorneys were trying to push the trial, but I believe proceedings begin tomorrow. So we're, right in the thick of things. And it's essentially a discrimination case. What makes it interesting, and I certainly won't use the term, because, it just does, reverse racism, my opinion, does not exist. I'm sorry, folks. It just does not exist. But it is an interesting suit. So Susan Peterson, which was I believe, prosecuting attorney, worked for the county's office for I think over 2 decades, was fired and she's suing pretty much across every title under the Civil Rights Act there is. She's suing for age discrimination, gender discrimination, racial discrimination. And as you can imagine, Susan Peterson and apparently four others were all white. And for those that don't know, Wesley Bell is black. And so I think it is pretty interesting to see that you have these five white folks, and the claim is that essentially he came in and cleaned house, and he specifically targeted white people. He specifically targeted not only just the white folks, but also over 40, if I'm remembering correctly. So going, to support the claim of age, gender, and race. So, as well as a separate suit. At first, kind of in my research, I was a little confused. I was like, wait a minute, how many things are happening at the same time here? He has for sexual assault. Apparently that case does not directly name him as the defendant, but what I believe all this by the St. Louis Journal, so local paper, has really deduced that the only entity that has been deposed is Wesley Bell, right? So the case, the deposition doesn't directly name Wesley Bell, being that Wesley Bell is the only one deposed, just use a little bit of common sense, right? So it's certainly interesting that all of this is happening concurrently as a standout, and I'm certain that it's going to play in his campaign. I guess depending on how you look at it, in terms of, is that a windfall or could this be a blight to his record? Is he was recently supported by one of the local Jewish organizations that supported his pro-Israel stance. And that's one of the primary distinctions between the three candidates. Cori Bush, as you know, has come out strongly against Israel, their actions, and calling it a genocide that Israel is committing on Gazans. And her former Jewish supporters have largely abandoned her. So I think the timing is certainly convenient that when Cori Bush is making pro-Palestinian statements, because being pro something doesn't automatically make you anti something else, right? So her position has been two-state solution, which, again, depending on which side of the table you sit on, some Israelis, some Jews find that offensive. They find it anti-Semitic to proclaim a two-state solution as a solution. Others find it reasonable. But it's certainly convenient that, when she has kind of drew her line in the sand, some of her same supporters are now cutting checks to Wesley Bell's campaign. And Wesley Bell is also drawing a line in the sand, staunchly in support of Israel. How that plays out is one of the things that's going to be interesting to me. But certainly this discrimination case, along with the sexual assault case, obviously depending on the outcome of that case, I don't know what his counsel is at this point, but I gotta think that that's certainly hard to try to run when you have so much heat on your back, when you're spending so much time in court. Look at Trump, right? He's like Trump is a prime example of what that looks like, trying to run a campaign, possibly run for reelection, and you have a significant amount of DOJ pressure on your back. So I guess we'll see if he continues to be in the race, but I think that um, you know I think that between the sexual assault and which I believe potentially can alienate local voters. From a national lens, certainly just kind of reading through what the journal has written about the claims, you can argue Trump is worse, but Trump also got 53% of middle-aged white women, educated, college degree, middle-aged white women over the age of 35 to 45, I believe. And, this is long after the, grab them by the you-know-what comment, right? And but, national politics are not the same as local politics. And when you're amongst the people, I think it has more of a hit home impact. So it's going to be interesting to see how constituents respond to that if he ends up coming out, kind of innocent. But I think, all in all, it may just come down to Maria and Corey, frankly, if we're being, I think, a little bit realistic.
Okay. Okay. Looks like Mr. Bell is getting active, huh?
Yeah.
He's getting active out and he definitely has name recognition. But so then we go to Corey Bush. So I kind of like her backstory. She the mother of two teens, she's a nurse, a pastor, and she also saw the same thing that Miss Chappelle-Nadal saw out in Ferguson during the uprising. Why is it like this? And something needs to change, and she wanted to be a part of that change. Which she's a citizen like a lot of us inside that she wanted to get involved. She does have a father who was a former alderman and a mayor of one of the towns out in Missouri, so she kind of has politics in her DNA. But she seemed like somebody who just kind of the accidental politician. Well, I want to get involved. How can I best get involved? So she got involved. And she ran against Lacey Clay, who was pretty entrenched. And people thought that was pretty brave of her to do that because Lacey Clay had been congressman in the 1st District out of Missouri for 20 years. His father held the seat for 30 years. So between him and his father, they were entrenched for 50 years. And from what I understand, people, particularly African Americans, would just go to the polls and just vote for Lacey Clay or Bill Clay, and that's it. And she ran against him in 2018. She lost, and she ran against him again in 2021 and won. And part of the issue that her community was facing was that her congressional district was number one in the nation in crime, top 3 in black poverty. And you're talking about 50% of the congressional district was African American, and nothing's changed after you had a congressman who'd been there for 20 years, his father been there for 30 years, and the Clay name had been out there for 50 years, and nothing's changed. Yeah. People were asking, are their politics benefiting them, or are they benefiting the community? And that was the issue. And so she won, and she ran as a change candidate. And so that resonated with a lot of people, and she squeaked out a victory against Lacey Clay, which is almost like someone beating Edward Moses in the 400 hurdles, who dominated that position for years.
Throwback.
And so she ran as a change candidate, but I know her nationally. I don't live in Missouri. I don't live in St. Louis. I don't live in Ferguson. So why do I know who Corey Bush is? I know she's part of the squad.
Right.
And she's got a lot of publicity nationally with her and AOC, Jamal Bowman, the lady out in out in Minnesota, the politician up in Boston, the Boston area. So I think it's about 5 or 6 of them who call themselves the Squad, and they tend to vote together as a block, and they take the same political positions on climate change, Islamophobia, the Palestine Israel conflict. They're against so-called genocide, and they want a ceasefire. And they also she also took a position to defund the police. But my thing about like politicians who I know nationally, you kind of wonder how is that benefiting their local constituents, particularly African Americans. I'm not saying Cori Bush is doing this, but a lot of black politicians, they run locally, they get elected, then they start promoting and advocating for everybody but black folks. And so Trump kind of pointed that out when I think his name was Cummings. Can't think of his first name, but Cummings was the politician in Baltimore, congressman from Baltimore, and
Elijah
pointing
Cummings.
out that Elijah Cummings, there were kids in cages. Why are there kids in cages? And really, he really going to war about the kids in cages. And Trump is like, why do you care? Can you even, what are you doing for your constituents in Baltimore?
Yeah.
Which is a legitimate issue. Are you going to promote? Are you ever going to advocate for anybody from Baltimore? Well, you advocate and you keep on these national issues. So we know where Cori Bush stands on national issues that may help her jockey for position within Congress, within Washington. How is that benefiting her constituents in Ferguson area, Florissant area, St. Louis? So if you were to walk down the street of her district, right, and you ask black folks about climate change, Islamophobia, what's going on in the Middle East, they probably draw a blank. You know what I mean? So I always wonder, like, why, when particularly black politicians who get elected in a black neighborhood and soon immediately start advocating for everything but black folks. And I don't know how this is benefiting her constituents. And I don't think she ran on those policies when she defeated Lacey Clay or running against Lacey Clay. I think she ran on something else. So what's her scorecard locally? Is the question. And then she also ran on defund the police, which it sounds like more messaging from people on social media, on Twitter. It sounds cute, defund the police and chanting defund the police and blah, 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 blah. It sounds cute, but, there's a violent criminal's dream. Yeah, defund the police so we can create more crime in these black neighborhoods, and then the police don't show up. So why is that? Who advocated for defund the police? Did anybody advocate for defund the police on Ferguson? I think they're now saying that on Ferguson, St. Louis area. I think Mr. Chappelle-Nadal is now saying that we need more resources for policing in the area. So and then she also got in trouble where got some negative press. I didn't go into a lot of detail of it, but negative press about while she's saying defund the police, she's also stepping up her security detail. So she wants coverage for her, but not necessarily for her constituents. And it sounds like more of a national battle cry, defund the police, than something would resonate locally with her constituents, which was number one in crime when she was running against Lacey Clay.
Well, one of the things I'll work a little backwards here, because I remember when you're talking about Cori Bush increase in security, and one of the things that you don't tend to, at least for me, is not something that immediately comes to mind, is the position, the very precarious position, and that politicians find themselves in, and to some degree, some would argue they should be in that position. I think more reasonable folks would try to identify where is the line, because one of the things that Maria talked about, just kind of privately, after we wrapped up that episode, the town hall, was the fact that she did get death threats. And the fact that, for the same thing that I certainly admired about her, the fact that she truly canvasses through her district. She's door knocking. She is not a politician that you have to particularly set an appointment to have a conversation with. When you go to the grocery store, you see her. When you go to the bank, you see her. Like, she is an individual that lives within the community that she serves. So in other words, she is not an individual that is hard to find. And, listening to her, talk about the toll that takes, where day in and day out, one of the things that you'll recall, I believe it was prior to COVID. It was either prior to COVID or it was during, like, the was that 2020 or 2021? I still feel like the 3 years of COVID just kind of meshed together. But with the NAACP, if you recall, the NAACP issued a travel warning for the state of Missouri that Black folks should not travel through the state of Missouri because it was because of the violence that was happening specifically against Black people, because of the militias that was specifically targeting Black folks. FBI corroborated that in congressional hearings, that BLM is not the danger. They are not the boogeyman that folks think they are. It is the disgruntled white male who is either a veteran, has experience in law enforcement, and they have this sense of loss of control, loss of country. So they are joining militia in unprecedented numbers. And one of those hotbeds for militia, which really, when you look at the history of Missouri, I think that has remained pretty consistent. Once you get out of St. Louis, the majority of Missouri is predominantly white. You still have sundown towns in Missouri today. In 2024, you still have sundown towns. So I say all of that to just kind of paint a clearer picture that because of that conversation with Maria, that I don't pass judgment on Cori Bush because she is on a national spotlight, unlike Maria. If Maria was feeling such a pressure, I can only imagine Cori Bush's inbox, what that looks like, what the mailbox looks like, right? And, while I think that politicians should be held accountable, the government should be, I'm a firm believer that the government should be afraid of its people. It should be. The people should not be afraid of the government. It should be the other way around. Because the power is supposed to lie with the people. The people are supposed to be the ones hiring the government to execute the jobs that we can't do ourselves on a daily basis, right? And I think in a lot of ways we lose sight of that. But I think that there is a fine line between holding folks accountable. Well, I won't even say fine line. I think there is a huge line between holding folks accountable and pushing death threats. Look at what happened to, I believe, the governor, Michigan.
Right. The kidnapping.
Right, the kidnapping attempt. And what was it? A white militia. So in other words, there's accountability, and then there is kidnapping and assault and battery, and that is not accountability. That's just breaking the law. And when you have folks, when you're surrounded by folks that are a part of the infrastructure that continues to um, seek to target Black folks, then her increasing that security, I feel is much needed. The other point I'm gonna push back on you with is the defund police. Um, to be clear, defund police, and you have to take a little bit of a kind of a contemporary history lesson. Really, kind of going back to Bush, GW. After the Patriot Act, 9/11 happens, or 9/11 happens. We get the Patriot Act. It becomes carte blanche. A blank check to begin pumping up, and we can draw a direct line between the inflation of the DoD budget to the point where DoD was like, "Hey, y'all giving us too much money.
Right.
We don't even know what to do with this much money. We can only buy so many toys. We can only hire so many folks." So
Yeah.
what began to happen? We began to see a militarization of the local police force. Well, when Obama got in office, what a lot of folks didn't realize, and we've talked about it on this show, the kind of downfall, so to speak, of certainly the silencing, I think, of Tavis Smiley and Cornel West, because they were the first ones to sound the alarm on the policies that Obama was supporting. But this is first term Obama. This is, I'll throat punch you if you talk badly about Obama. In other words, Black folks weren't trying to hear that. Not in 2009, 2010 at all. Meanwhile, in reality, Obama was simply continuing the policies that were put in place under GW, and more specifically, architected by Rumsfeld and Cheney. I always call Obama Rumsfeld and Cheney's wet dream. The things that Rumsfeld and Cheney could have accomplished if they had Obama in office during their tenure versus Bush. But the point is that when we look at the militarization of the police force, it began under Bush, but it went to an nth degree under Obama. Obama was issuing billions to the police force. And what was being defunded at that time? Education. Education was being defunded, but you didn't hear a defund education chant coming from law enforcement. So when folks, now fast forward to Ferguson and the rise of BLM after Michael Brown, and the defund police campaigns that were being pushed, they were being pushed on the local level because these were not your Mayberry MFD police force that you were dealing with. For those that remember the Andy Griffith show, these were not your local police force walking around with 6-shooters. These were your militarized police that didn't even have proper military training, but your beat cops that have access to assault weapons and SWAT tactics and SWAT style weapons. And these are the folks that are pulling over your Philando Castiles. And these are the folks that are essentially committing extrajudicial murders under the watchful eye of the state. So one example that I continue to get on my soapbox about is Camden, New Jersey. When you look at Camden for over 30 years stayed in the top 20 kind of worst cities for crime and violent crimes and drugs. And one of the things that Camden did in the last 6 years was they fired their police force, completely got rid of it. And what they did is they rebuilt a community policing effort. One tenet of that community police that any potential candidate for the police force has to door knock. for the area that they will be assigned to. They have to introduce themselves. They're to each household. They have to. They have a community board that oversees decisions of hiring, that oversees decisions of police misconduct when it comes to interactions with the police force. And in the first year that this community policing effort, violent crimes, homicide, even drug crimes dropped 30% in year one. This is the effort that people are talking about when they are saying defund the police. Let's take the 20 billion that got issued under the totality of the Obama campaign, divert a good amount of that back. Like, let's refund education and dismantle the militarization of police and rebuild it as a community policing effort where the community is hand in hand with the police. Folks absolutely understand that there needs to be a police presence.
Yeah,
Not,
I
you know
yeah,
what I mean?
but I don't
And
think I don't think we disagree at all. I think I'm big on like not. I don't know why police have to have drones and these tanks, and I think we saw those tanks and those military grade equipment at out in Ferguson. It looked like it was shocking to see tanks in the middle of the street and people and with like military equipment pointing guns at like kids walking on the
right,
street.
right.
And so, but I'm saying what I'm saying is that there were people who were taking it literally. We need to defund. There were some people taking it literally. That we need to get rid of the
I'm
police.
certain,
And
but
they were going overboard with it.
when
So,
more serious organizers and those that were advocating for real policy changes, not just anger built up and
okay,
kind of joining the streets as a way to um, redirect that anger, right? I think it's important that we do provide clarity, right? Because you have a lot of folks that kind of took that surface chant, defund the police, and used it to attack the folks that were even making that distinction to say we're not advocating for the elimination of the police. We are simply advocating for a different model. They're,
okay.
they and
I think that's something for. I think that's something.
at this point, there needs to be a complete rebuilding like Camden uh, has done.
I think that's something Corey Bush could shed light on. So when she said defund the police, because nobody's shedding light on it with people on social media going, "We need to get rid of the police." I'm like,
No,
and then the Republicans are building upon that. What
right.
defund the police means. So I think she needs to clarify that. But okay, quickly, as we run up on the hour, so let's just go through different areas where you think these candidates rank in terms of fundraising, the media, and so on and so forth. In terms of fundraising, what do you see? Um, Wesley Bell versus Corey Bush and Miss Chappelle-Nadal.
Well, as I talked about earlier, right, that Wesley Bell has just secured some heavily funded pockets. Obviously, Corey Bush being on the national level, but she has unfortunately alienated some of the deeper pocketed organizations. However, being an incumbent, being on a national level, just that alone, right? She's obviously going to have the biggest bank. I think compared to the three in terms of level of fundraising, arguably at this point, I think Maria may come in with the smallest bank comparatively, but I think it's also important to include the sources of those funds, right? Um, what because that therein lies what is the difference if you are primarily driven by corporate ownership who are your constituents at that point? You know, if you're if you know, because corporations can be constituents. There's nothing dissuading corporations from being constituents. So if the majority of your donorship is coming from corporate donors, then the question has to come up of where does your allegiance lie, right? Is it going to be for the people, or is it going to be for the benefit of corporations? And you know, when we look at a state like Missouri, and specifically uh, to I think one of the common threads that at least on the surface, all three of these candidates seem to strongly advocate for Black folks, seem to strongly advocate for the progress economically and socially for Black folks within their community and their districts. So, but the question is who is going to be able to get it done because they have the ability to align their allegiance with the issues of their actual community, not just the corporate donors who have the ability to cut checks that the majority of Missourians just don't have the ability to.
Mhm.
So I
Okay,
think
so
that's important to to include in the analysis.
I mean, I'm not sure. I guess it, you know, would resonate with the people, but I mean, I see the difference, but I don't vote. But it seemed like my impression. I don't know if it's true or not, but it seemed like Miss Chappelle-Nadal may struggle in this area the most because she's probably going to rely on grassroots funding. When
Mhm.
Wesley Bell is funded by certain Jewish groups, and also I think he's also backed by a few unions, so he may
Right.
have the advantage in terms of funding her and him and he and Corey Bush, who may have more name recognition and may more have a she may have a relationship with donors from her previous campaigns. But the reality is sometimes people can't win because they don't have the funding to go on. So even though Wesley Bell may have some um, you know issues related to like lawsuits, but he is well funded. So looks like Mr. Pelladol may be lacking in that area. I guess we'll soon find out. But also the next one would be media savvy. Who would you think is sort of the most media savvy amongst those three? If you were to guess.
So I think what I like is to your earlier point. One of the things that I really appreciated about Corey Bush is it was a Cinderella story, right? You called it the accidental politician. She's driven by uh, what was happening at that time within her community, and it was impacting her household personally. And she wanted to get up, much like so many others. You know, when you look at Eric Gardner's daughter, who unfortunately has passed away. When you look at Tamir Rice's mother. When you look at no, my God, why am I blanking on his name?
To,
Uh, yeah, Zimmerman.
I know you're talking about. Yeah, I know you're talking about. Yeah.
I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, but his mother ran locally. So in other words, when we're all driven by uh, something that impacts us personally, um, it's hard not to root for the underdog, right? And I think because of that, she came in on the squad, and we saw um, similar kind of watershed moments, even with AOC, even with Ilhan Omar out of Minnesota, kind of uprooting these incumbents, and they all seem to kind of share, which I've noted before, almost the same marketing team, right? Because the way in which they marketed, I think this is postactblue.com. So they certainly got them up to speed on the media training. So I think Corey Bush uh, comes in very strong. Um, but I think that I like Maria though. I like, even, because Corey is no longer the underdog, right? She is the powers that be now, right? So Maria is arguably the underdog here, but I think she just connects to folks in a way that is much more personal, right? And I think that resonates and comes across even in the screen. So I I'm gonna give the slight edge to Maria. I think Corey is still like, you can get some cheerleaders behind her. She's galvanizing, rah rah rah. But Maria just connects to folks. I think in a much more personable way. So yeah, and she doesn't dance when she answers
Right.
questions.
Right.
She's
I haven't.
very
Go
direct.
ahead. I haven't necessarily heard a lot of Wesley Bell
Well,
speak. I can't really say what he's like in front of a camera, what he's like in front of the media, what he's like on stage with Corey Bush, with a Corey Bush incumbent, or Miss Chappelle-Nadal. Um, uh, I haven't really seen Corey Bush campaign a lot either. I know she's just part of the squad. I know she like said something like "squad up" after she got reelected or whatever.
yeah,
It
yeah.
sounds like the Super Friends, like when
Right, right,
when the
right.
Pentagon was activate. But I think if I were to rank them, I would say probably Miss Chappelle-Nadal. I think she could resonate with people in the media, people like I said, corporate donors, businessmen, as well as people in her community. So it seemed like they could be kind of running neck and neck with her and Miss and Corey Bush. It depends on whose message resonates the most, and if Miss Chappelle-Nadal can actually get a lot of media coverage, because we know that Corey Bush has a name recognition. She also has the super friends behind. If they were to put their might behind her, she can stay out in front of people like you and me. But whether that resonates locally, I have no idea. I think they're all from the Ferguson area. I think they're very well known locally.
Mhm.
Depends on if Miss Chappelle-Nadal can get the resources and the funding to run a social media campaign, and to get the same type of media coverage that she had when there was an uprising out there. So she was in front of Don Lemon. She was in front of um, I can't think of the lady's name. Um, she was in front of basically the corporate media, and she
Okay.
was and she had a lot to say on national TV, and she was a spokesman for the community. So it depends
Right.
on if she gets enough media coverage nationally to compete with Wesley Bell and Corey Bush. So that's basically it. That's I think this is an important race because it could be a national. It could become a national race, and then Missouri seems to be like a bellwether for the Midwest, and I think Trump and, like I said, Mike Pence kind of highlighted that they really wanted to put resources behind Josh Hawley, and they put a lot of resources outside of St. Louis. And they kind
Right.
of painted Claire McCaskill as the black candidate because she has so much support in St. Louis. But when they went to the rural areas, I think Josh Hawley kind of beat her in those areas. But I think that again, I think Ferguson. I think St. Louis could be Missouri could be a bellwether for the Midwest. And I think as Missouri catches cold, it seems like the rest of the Midwest catches pneumonia. So I think this could become a hotly contested race. I think it could be a lot of eyeballs on this race nationally. So we'll see what happens if Congresswoman Maria Chappelle-Nadal can pull it off. So that's Trump and the GE. Endorses Maria Chappelle-Nadal for Mr. Mitchell on the Stock Exchange. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you.